Recently, I signed up for a customer service training course at work. It was an in-person training course, which is a novelty these days, no online training. And one of the activities we had to do was talk about good and bad customer service that we can remember. To be honest, I can't really think of very many good examples of customer service I've had, but I can think of plenty of examples of bad customer service. And I will say, one thing I've realised recently is customer service just in all industries seems to be much worse than I remember it being in the past. And I'm approaching this from the perspective of like a loner, someone who pretty much lives as a hermit, tries to avoid all interactions with other people where possible. So if I can notice it, then I'm sure other people have noticed it as well. Following on from this course, I felt like I had to say something about it. And while it's an annoyance in society, having to endure all this terrible customer service, I think there's some ways that we can benefit from this, some things we can get out of it. So I'd like to talk about some examples of terrible customer service I've had recently, and then we can talk about how we can gain from this. So, to start off, we all go to shops and such. Well, most of us probably go to shops. And one thing I've noticed recently is in, let's say, small shops and even larger shops, all the staff seem to have these little headsets on. So they have an internal phone or internal walkie-talkies or something. They always have these headsets on, they're, playing Xbox Live or something. Presumably the whole point of this is to talk about work-related things, let's say, well, I don't know what they're supposed to talk about really. There must be some benefit to this, because I'm sure the technology must have been around when I was younger. I used to be young, working at a shop, but we didn't seem to have these. You'd think perhaps it's because they have fewer staff members to do more work, but that can't necessarily be true, because I remember when I was working in a shop, there were only ever 2 people working there in the evenings. But one thing I've noticed is that all they seem to do is just chat away to each other, talking about completely irrelevant things. So I think I went to a little Tesco's recently, and they were just talking about Mario Kart for some reason, which I can't really argue with that, but it didn't seem to be the kind of thing they were supposed to be talking about. And sometimes they're talking about things they do on a night out, and this perhaps isn't really appropriate when there are old ladies and children around. They don't want to hear this sort of thing. But the worst is when you have to go to a till, so a checkout. So I would always opt for a self-service checkout where I can. I just want to go in, pay for my stuff and leave. I hate that you have to get age verification now for energy drinks and such, but I'm trying to cut back on those. But yeah, so when you go to a checkout and they're just not paying attention to you at all, they're serving you and going through the motions, but they're mentally they're still in a conversation with their other colleagues, and they will still be talking away to each other, which is, I guess that it's not a bad thing. I'm not negatively impacted, but as a customer, I feel like I'm being a massive inconvenience to them. I didn't really feel as though I was welcome to buy things from them. So, another example, this is a bit of a different one, and that is with dealing with the NHS. So, in the UK, we have free healthcare, we have the NHS, and it sounds great on paper, but when you have to deal with the bureaucracy of it, it's just an absolute nightmare. And it's a combination of long waiting times for things without any communication. So whenever you try to call up, let's say you're waiting for an operation, which I was a few years ago, if you want to try and call up and find out anything, you'll be lucky to get through to them after 2 hours on hold, that sort of thing. When you're there though, you're just being rushed to things. So if I recall, I was having an operation in 2023, and I'd waited for a year and a half to have this operation, and it was actually cancelled last minute because the surgeon had decided to take some annual leave, which was a bit shocking. So fortunately they found a second surgeon to do this, but it was a very complex surgery. So looking back on it with hindsight, this was definitely not a good idea. I got in and I was just being rushed around to different stations. So I had to see various different nurses throughout the day. At one point I had to get changed into my dressing gown, which I was struggling to do because I was a bit nervous. I'd never had any surgery where I was going to get put to sleep, and the anaesthetist was just complaining to me in the operating theatre as I was lying there freaking out, really worried about what was going to happen. And when I came to, the doctor or the surgeon never came to see me. He was just off doing the next surgery. Now, I don't blame them at all. I know they've got a really busy schedule, but in this respect, the customer service, I suppose, would be the greater bureaucracy as a whole, the greater organisation. So I just felt like a constant annoyance and inconvenience while I was there. All the nurses and such, they were brilliant. They were feeding me yogurts and such afterwards because the anaesthetist must have done something when they pulled the breathing tube out to damage my throat. I was in a lot of pain. And this was a recurring theme every time I went back. So I had to go back for a few more surgeries, unfortunately some emergency surgeries. And every time I just felt like a huge burden to everyone around me. From their perspective, I don't really have a choice. I have to go to them. So what incentive did they have to do things differently? I was just another number to them, really. And that was something that it feels really disheartening when you're undergoing repetitive major surgery. I was told I had to have a fourth surgery, and I was like, nope, I'm just going to finally give up and go private. It's expensive, but I'm going to pay for it. And it was so nice. It was such a relief. People actually listen to you. Just something simple like that. I didn't feel like an annoyance. Of course, I was paying a massive sum of money to them, but it was amazing, I will say. And let's move on to my third example then. So my third example of some pretty poor customer service I've had recently is within my workplace. So it's no one in particular. Again, it's like an organisational thing, whereby it feels as though the organisation that I'm dealing with or the department, they're massively overworked, or they just don't feel the incentive to give me any information about something. So in this case, I've applied for they call it an AI apprenticeship. It's like an internal training course, or perhaps it's external. I still don't fully understand, but there was a very long application process. This closed a couple of weeks ago now. I've had some confirmation about receiving my application, because it was like a 5-step long process, something crazy like that. And since then, nothing. I've heard absolutely nothing since then. And the problem is the course is supposed to start in a couple of weeks' time, and I really need to plan my work around this if I am successful. I understand if I'm successful, I have 20% of my work hours protected to do this training course for a period of like 13 months. So I really do need to have some kind of update, to be honest. But so far, nothing. And, in some way I'd say this feels very unprofessional. It would be really nice to know like what stage things are at, when we might hear back. But the fear is, because I know quite a few people have applied for this and there are limited spaces, I don't want to be an annoyance, in a way that might affect my application. So I'm worried about contacting them. So I'm just stuck in this situation of just waiting and waiting, hoping to hear something before the course starts. These were some perhaps quite pathetic examples. I guess there's a lot of privilege I have there in these being the worst examples of customer service I've had, like that I can remember recently. But what can we really learn from this situation if terrible customer service is widespread these days? And I can think of two things. So, number one, very simple. If you're able to just have basic customer service skills in whatever role you're in, then that'll make you an above average employee or above average candidate. And I'm not saying like go over the top, like that's one thing that would put me off as well. Like when I have the misfortune of having to go into a clothing shop and the staff members are just constantly asking you questions, trying to be nice. I just want to go in there, get my stuff, pay, not be ignored, and leave. So just treating your customers, or whoever they may be, the people you work with, in a way that you yourself would like to be treated, it's going to put you way ahead of the average person these days. Listening to them, actually looking at them, making it appear as though you're interested in them, that sort of thing. These are all simple things, I would say, and just doing these in the workplace will put you miles ahead of other people. The second thing is the opportunity to complain about customer service. Now, I'm British, so I would rather chew my own arm off than make a complaint in most cases. But when it gets to the point that I feel as though they don't even want me there, I think it's justified to raise some complaints. And who knows, what's the worst that can happen? Sometimes you get some free stuff. Like, I can think of a couple of examples where some of my colleagues have done this recently. So one of my colleagues somehow always seems to have bad experiences going to restaurants. Now, I don't want to say that she is the common denominator in all of these bad experiences, but I don't think I've had similar experiences ever in my life. But she'll always call the restaurants afterwards and somehow will always get free meals out of complaining about things. Another colleague of mine, she was trying to cancel a subscription recently. Now, this is the opposite problem. So she was trying to cancel this subscription, and after the phone call was finished, she said she'd received such good customer service, so they must have deployed their A-team for this. They were ready. Such good customer service that she changed her mind and hadn't cancelled her subscription for whatever it was she was signed up for. So I guess you have to be careful in these respects. So when you are trying to do something like make a complaint, you have to be determined and stick to your guns, and you have to win the battle of words with the person you are on the phone with. I want to end on a bit of irony I've just remembered, and that is when it goes back to my AI training course, the people who are actually making the decision, the final decision, and are supposed to be getting back to me on this, are the people who put on the customer service training course, which gave me the idea to make this video in the first place. I guess that's a bit funny and a bit frustrating, but I'm not sure what to think about that really. I wish customer service actually was a bit better these days, like I vaguely remember it being when I was younger and a shop employee. But yeah, thank you for listening to my video on customer service. I've actually been, since coming up with this idea, recommended all kinds of videos recently on YouTube, even from channels that I already watch, about communication, strong communication and talking to people. And that, it does make me think that, is there some sort of additional AI going on, sort of reading my thoughts? It's aware of what I'm trying to do at the moment. Is the internet real? Am I the only person on the internet and all this stuff is created for me somehow? Am I an AI? Am I real? But yeah, if you want to continue listening to my spiral into insanity and my existential crisis, then perhaps this is a good channel for you to watch. But yeah, thank you for listening, and I hope you receive good customer service today.